And welcome back to Pod of the Century. Galen Clavio joining you once again here as we get ready to talk about the first couple of days of the knockout phase. Camille is back with us. Good to see you again. How you doing?
Good, doing well. Definitely a lot to talk about these past few days. First 2 days of the knockout stages. Probably not as exciting in terms of both teams having a chance as we could have expected, but we still have halfway to go.
Yeah, it's one of those, there's so much, it's a different energy, obviously, in the knockouts because it really matters. Like, you lose, you're out of the World Cup. And it makes sometimes for some really entertaining games in the round of 16. But, it's funny because the way that the bracket fell, you ended up with a bunch of matchups, at least in these first couple of days, where there was a clear, better team in each of the games. And much as we might hope for, some kind of an upset, it's kind of like the NCAA tournament. You're just not going to get many two, losing to 15 seeds or one losing to 16 seeds. And in this case, it's not quite that big of a disparity, but the big teams have really come to play thus far. And that's really been kind of the big story, I think, throughout everything. Let's start with today, and then we'll talk about yesterday. The two games today, we'll talk about the one that just wrapped up first, as England just obliterates Senegal 3-0. This was an interesting one because there was a lot of questions about this English team, how they were going to handle Senegal, obviously a very athletic squad, a team that, looked surprisingly good in the group stage. And, you think about England, you think about pressure, you think about the amount of pressure that their press puts on them. And it's sometimes bigger than the moment for them in a lot of cases. Absolutely not the case here. As they dealt with a little bit of an early threat from Senegal, but then the goals started flowing. And, 3 goals later, basically you could have turned this game off in the 55th minute and not missed a single thing. Your reflections from this one?
Yeah, so as you touched upon, I just think they were really ruthless today, England. I think the moment wasn't too big. They came prepared. They weren't going to be one of those early upsets. Complete turnaround from what we've seen with, the way Southgate likes to set the team up. Like the Nations League was such a disappointment. Just the way they played, it was a little boring. A lot of people called for, different team selections and all that. And yeah, I think that the moment they allowed Senegal to have the ball a little bit more and forced them to play out of the back, their press was just outstanding, and they were ruthless. They were efficient. And I think the team selection today was really good. I don't know if anything in terms of Foden over Sterling had anything to do, if Southgate would have went with Sterling, if not for his personal issue he had, that his home got robbed back in England. But regardless, I think the youth really sparked this has been sparking this team through the group stage. And yeah, today we just saw Foden, Saka, and Jude Bellingham kind of just spark it in midfield on the wings. And yeah, they just weren't going to go out this early. And with this type of creativity, this kind of passing efficiency, they're looking as dangerous as anyone.
Yeah, it's interesting because, certainly England kind of does this to themselves in that they tend to get their youth underrated a bit. They get very overrated to start a tournament, and if they don't look like some weird combination of, Maradona and Pele, then they're perceived to be underperforming. It's a very weird quirk, but man, Jude Bellingham in particular looks absolutely like a guy that's going to have not just a tremendous career in international play, but might be the story of the Premier League in a very short period of time. He has that goal right before half where he just bulldozes the midfield, picks out the pass ahead of him, and that leads to the Harry Kane goal, was one of the best moves we've seen, I think, in this entire World Cup. And as you mentioned, Phil Foden gets the start this time around, and he looks really good. And they didn't even play Marcus Rashford, who still qualifies as a relatively young player. Yeah. He scored 2 goals in the previous game. There's so much to like right now about the way England's playing, and yet I feel like there was a quote from somebody on Twitter, one of the Italian journalists. He's like, I really hate what I've watched out of this England team, and yet you look at their results: 6-2, 0-0, 3-0, 3-0 in the knockout. That's about as perfect as you can get in the World Cup. I can't tell if it's a stylistic thing or if you think, oh, Southgate's going to be playing this conservative style and therefore this must be bad. But if you don't go in with that expectation, you got to really like what you see out of this team.
Yeah, I think I think the players have kind of taken it upon themselves, especially the younger ones, to kind of rebound from that Euro final, that heartbreaking loss. Yeah, and I feel like, I don't know, from what I was seeing on the sidelines, it seems like Southgate's pretty in tune with his players. He's everyone who was coming off, he was really kind of getting in their ear, or really just talking the ones who were coming on. And yeah, I think just stylistically, this is completely different from really anything we've seen from England in recent history. And yeah, once you get Kane going as well, he gets the first to kind of get over that little hump for this World Cup specifically. And yeah, I mean, there's just nothing not to like right now.
Yeah, Kane, was obviously scores the goal. That's important for him. He's one off Wayne Rooney's record at this point, and then also had an assist and had a hockey assist in the other one. I mean, it was nice to see him kind of get back into action. And I mean, look, I do think some of the early moves by Senegal, if I'm nervous at all about England, it's about the center back pairing, and It's about just kind of the overall conduct of the defense. I didn't think Kyle Walker was particularly great in the first half at right back for them. Harry Maguire is always a concern if you're England. And that, Senegal just wasn't going to bother them on this day.
Yeah.
And, look, I will say, probably the other big storyline coming out of this, it's important for England, 0 yellow cards. So that's always something that people forget about until it happens. The accrual of yellow cards leading to a suspension in the World Cup, and England so far in good shape as far as that's concerned. So they move through, and they'll be facing off against France, who, I'm sorry, Camille, ends up beating Poland 3. I'm going to put the 1 in quotes because there were some questions there at the end. This was a game where it actually reminded me a lot of Netherlands USA.
Yes,
in that there was a clear better team, but I thought Poland, for as much as they were struggling, they got some chances off early. They were threatening France. Lloris looked kind of questionable in goal. And you're like, well, Lewandowski, you get some more ball movement, you hit some counterattacks, and then they give up the goal right before half. And that was, it was not a great defensive effort by Poland on that goal. They kind of hung Szczesny out to dry. And from there, the game was kind of decided. Like, Poland was not set up to be able to come back in this one. I know this one was near and dear to your heart. What were your thoughts coming into this one and then going out of it?
Yeah, well, coming in, I just never had the expectation that our defense would be able to handle the pace of the likes of Mbappe and just that dynamic type of attack. But honestly, bad result, obviously never expected to win, but I think this was easily their best showing from an entertainment perspective, from just the confidence, like the way they were on the ball perspective. Yeah, like you said, shades of that USA Netherlands match. Kind of, I feel like Poland only really was allowed to keep possession because France allowed them to, because they knew they could just hit them in transition, and you saw that it really hurt them in the second half with Mbappe. But yeah, ultimately it was always going to come down to that first goal, and Poland had their chances. Should have put one away, fired right at Lloris, that biggest one. Yeah, then once they get into that kind of shell, they really don't know how to break out, and getting that first goal before half was crucial for France. And then just ultimately Mbappe is Mbappe. Just we're literally witnessing the best player probably at this moment in time just break out. And
I mean,
it's a joy to watch.
He's already exceeded Pele's record in World Cup goals through his first 2 World Cups. I mean, I said this on Twitter. It's like, I hope people are watching and really taking it all in. this is a player. This is kind of like watching Tiger Woods in like the 2000 U.S. Open, you know, or something like that, where and it's a shame to some degree that Fox's coverage has been so U.S. centric and so England centric. I don't think they're doing enough to tell Americans, like, you need to watch this person because what you're seeing does not happen in international soccer. Like, this guy is at the absolute top of his game. And I think if you're the type of person who likes this game or is trying to get into it, watching him, you almost get used to the way that he plays and kind of take it for granted. But then you go look at everybody else. And we talked so much about how goal scoring is so important. His ability to get the ball in the back of the net, to put himself in the right position time and time again. It's a wild card, the likes of which we really haven't seen in the World Cup in several years. I mean, probably going back to Ronaldo, not Cristiano Ronaldo, but actual Ronaldo in 2002. I think it might be the last time we saw a player like this in form. And I just hope people are like acknowledging it and understanding, like, they're seeing greatness unfolding before their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, he broke out last World Cup. I think it was 4 goals propelling that run, and now he's just like, what curse? That group stage curse gets past it. Obviously a favorable matchup today. They're always expected to win to that game, but still he has to get the job done, put the game away, which he does. Just 2 spectacular goals. Maybe Strenson's positioning was maybe a little faulty on that first one of his, but still. Rarely is a goalkeeper saving either of those, and he's just running away with the golden boot right now. So.
Well, that's the thing. I will say the one thing about France, and as we think about France, England, and the way, and we'll do a preview before that game, but just kind of a quick thought.
Yeah,
that game might end up 4-3. I don't know who will win that, but the thing about France, they seem to be able to score at will. England has shown an ability to score almost at will. They have so many attacking options. And yet both of the teams have a critical issue with their defense. Yeah. With France, I'm a Spurs guy. I've been following Lloris for years. He has not been his best in the Premier League the last couple of years, and he's not been his best in this tournament. Poland nearly scored twice, one off of a poor effort on Lloris's part, and the other on him going up for a ball and then losing it off the head.
The ball.
One player being in the right position, and suddenly it's a whole new ball game. I think that might have tied it up. If I forget when exactly that happened, but I think it was still 1-0 France at that point. And then for England, obviously, as we talked about, their central defense just hasn't been up to par thus far. I'm just fascinated with this much offensive firepower meeting each other in a quarterfinal. Like, you could see 6 or 7 goals scored. I wouldn't be surprised in the least.
Yeah, easily. I think both, like you said, both defenses have been suspect. If you put enough pressure on them, like Senegal did today, they probably had 1 or 2 good enough chances that if they had Mane or the likes of someone like that they probably could have scored, in that first half. But yeah, there's just too much offensive firepower to suggest that, England's going to, revert back to some, boring style of play to think that they're going to win that way. And yeah, I feel like both teams are really good in transition. So it's kind of just like a chess match in terms of who's going to concede the more possession to each other, or if it'll be more of a midfield battle, and maybe that'll hurt France without having, Pogba and Kanté.
Yeah, it's weird to think about it that way, but England might really have the better quality in midfield.
Right.
And that's not something that we've been able to say that often. Yeah. But they're getting excellent tournaments, not just out of the younger players, but Jordan Henderson's had an excellent tournament thus far, and they've got players that haven't really played that much that can come off the bench and contribute as well. So that was today's matchups. Yesterday's matchups, we had, of course, the game that broke all the hearts here in North America. Yes. Netherlands 3, United States 1. This was one of those games, I think, you can say, look, hey, there's really no shame in losing to the Netherlands. It's actually a Netherlands team that seems to be getting better with every game. They were clinical in this one. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They didn't really break a sweat. And look, I think that to some degree, how bad Group A was masked how good this Netherlands team is actually playing with each other, despite not being a vintage Netherlands squad. So I don't think there's a whole lot for the U.S. to hang their heads on in terms of overall effort. But wow, they looked tactically naive in this game. Van Gaal in the post game even said, well, the U.S. didn't adapt.
Yeah.
They didn't change. We knew we were going to attack the flanks. That was a point of emphasis. We'd seen that in the film, and it's unfortunate because you nick that goal, towards the end, and then you could have nicked a goal in the first minute with Pulisic, and that changes the complexion a little bit. But it's also, this is exactly how I felt after the U.S. lost to Belgium 8 years ago, where it's like it would have taken a lucky break among all lucky breaks for the U.S. to advance. They were clearly outclassed by this Netherlands team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just the difference in the wingbacks was just everything. Dumfries for Netherlands has always, since last Euro, has just been really central focus of their attack, pushing down those wings. And there are just some players who just do so much better when they put their national team's jersey on. And that includes like Depay. Gakpo's obviously breaking out. And yeah, it was just the wing systems. Those first two Netherlands goals were so similar. Just the man marking there was obviously very poor. And on the other hand, yeah, like you said, Pulisic could have put the U.S. up right away. That changes everything. Maybe forces the Netherlands to not respect the U.S. as much, concede possession to try and break, because then you'd have to kind of come back at the U.S.'s throats. And we saw, even though they had a weak, 3 group stage opponents, when they were forced to kind of build out of the back and break teams down, those goals didn't come until late. And that killer instinct was really lacking then, but man, it was not against the U.S.
Yeah. So Netherlands moves on. U.S., you look at them, you say, okay, this is a nice young collection of talent. I mean, a lot of these players will almost certainly be in the mix to be on the roster for the Gold Cup and for World Cup 26. And look, there's a lot of nice pieces to build around, but it's clear there needs to be an elevation in understanding how to approach the game. I liked the effort that all of the CONCACAF teams gave in terms of they really tried to push the action. They really tried to be on the front foot. Yeah, I mean, the U.S. actually outshot the Netherlands and had more shots on goal in this game, and yet never looked like they were a serious contender to win. And that's kind of what happened. It's what happened to Mexico. It's what happened with Canada. It's what happened with Costa Rica. I've always been a longtime proponent that the U.S. needs to join UEFA, because it would at least guarantee that they have to elevate their tactical game.
Or at least CONMEBOL.
Or CONMEBOL, yeah. I mean, either one. Well, where it's like you've got to play against. You can't just play against each other. You might be able to get to the knockout stage, but you're going to get exposed quickly unless you win your group. And I think honestly, I think the U.S. would have probably beaten Senegal the way that Senegal played today. I think that they would have been the superior team, but they didn't win their group, and they weren't really a threat to win their group, because to some degree of the way that they played in the second half of Wales, and the fact that they just, as much as they played well defensively against England, they were never a threat to actually score a goal, it felt like, in that one, except for that one shot by Pulisic. So whatever happens, I do think Berhalter deserves credit for, getting this team together, picking what was a pretty functional group of players, getting them out of the group stage with 5 points. But I think if the U.S. is serious about competing for a title in 26, and they should be, because they are going to be one of the co-hosts, there's got to be greater tactical acumen. There's got to be a better sense of what they have to do, not to get out of the group stage, but to compete at this level, because this is where they constantly hit their heads against the ceiling historically.
Yeah, I think, props to Berhalter. He's obviously gotten the team to this point. They made it out of the group stage, and going into the tournament, that was the goal. Obviously now just recency kind of bias, I guess you could say, is just that loss hurts the way it happened. But in all things considered, this was the goal, and anything else, after would have just been extra and just extra motivation for the next World Cup. But at least you made it out of the group. You had solid performances. You hold England to a draw. The tactics were, fundamentally sound up until the Netherlands game. And I wouldn't be an advocate to keep Greg going to the next World Cup. Kind of thank him for his services. If you think that he can't, change the style of play or select the right team for that next one. But I just think the midfield really drove this team throughout the group stage, and they'll really be looking for a more efficient number 9. Probably, most of the center backs are pretty aging. Zimmerman had his ups and downs as well. So really, you're just really looking to build in the front and back, because that midfield should be set. With more experience within 4 years, it should just be running things once again.
And for everybody who's saying, "Oh, the U.S. needs to go get a goal scorer," it's like, well, so do most other countries. Right. This is not like you don't go down to Costco and like buy a goal scorer. Now that said, I was talking to some people about this, like. So many of the players that played huge minutes and played key roles for this U.S. team this year weren't even on the radar 4 years ago. And so there's plenty of time, and I think players will emerge, and not everybody that was there this time will be out there next time. The trajectory of U.S. talent development and players playing at high levels has only gone up over the course of the last couple of years. I think it's going to continue. So not to panic, but I do think that you're going to have to see some new players emerge and continue to place pressure and get better performances. So we'll see what happens with all of that. But we go to the other game, Argentina, Australia. This one a little bit closer than I think people thought it would be. Right. You never felt like Argentina was in danger in this one, but they also never really put Australia away. Australia didn't really manage a lot of chances. We didn't expect them to. They absorbed a bunch of Argentine pressure. Leo Messi with an individual moment of brilliance on the first goal. And, Alvarez coming through with that second goal was obviously key. But the fact that, you get the own goal technically towards the end there, and, Australia had another shot that could have potentially tied it up. It extends this level of kind of not entirely dominant performance out of Argentina. And I think in a vacuum, you wouldn't be too concerned about that. But you look at England, you look at France, you look at the Netherlands, who have to play in the next round, you look at Brazil. It's like, well, even Portugal, like all of these teams have had at least one moment where they just look the absolute dominant team. Argentina is yet to have that. Are you concerned?
Yeah, I'm not, I wasn't entirely convinced by that performance. Luckily for them, they don't have to play France or England on their side of the bracket, but I think the Netherlands was probably the least convincing. They just had a good matchup against the USA, but they took their time really breaking down Australia. Obviously took that moment of just Messi brilliance, and Australia was kept itself in the game. They've played with pride this whole tournament. Obviously just making it out of the group stage. Causing upsets. I think physically they were, challenging Argentina for enough of the game. And then, the goalkeeper makes a mistake in the back for that second goal. But aside from that Messi moment of brilliance, my God, like the finishing was just horrendous, especially late game when you're trying to put them away. I think even after, Australia did get that deflection, but they still, sent numbers forward towards the end. They got that last second chance, but I think Julian Alvarez, I think he's made a case to start over Lautaro Martinez from what we've seen.
Yeah.
Not just because he scored. Obviously, it was just a mistake. You have to put those away when you get those chances, but just based on the group stages, I think Lautaro Martinez is just lacking a lot of confidence right now. And I don't think, as good as Messi is against, if Argentina ends up meeting some of these higher tier teams, it's not going to be enough. It really isn't. And someone has to step up and help him, just at least in some form.
Yeah. And I mean, there's not a lot on the bench right now. I mean, you've got Alvarez. I mean, we're not going to see Dybala, I feel like that. I'm shocked he's on the roster, to be honest. It's going to be a really fascinating thing. And this was always the concern I had with Argentina. It's like, as individually brilliant as Messi is, he just can't quite carry this roster, and it's going to get progressively harder. Now, I don't know if it manifests itself against the Netherlands, but thinking about who Argentina is going to have to beat in the next game, most likely to get to the final, it feels like it might be a bridge too far, but we'll tackle that when we get to it. Netherlands, Argentina, let's talk about that real quick. I mean, this is a really fascinating set of opponents. It's not the worst opponent for Argentina to be facing here because, as we talked about, I mean, this is I don't think Argentina is going to make the same level of tactical mistakes that the U.S. made. There's not going to be that same disparity in terms of who's lining up where. You're going to have, I mean, Acuna and Molina on the wings. I think you're going to be able to handle their business. Romero's played very well thus far in central defense. And, with DePaul and McAllister, we haven't talked about McAllister. McAllister's had like a really good World Cup so far, but their ability to drop back and provide some additional defensive support should frustrate the Netherlands a lot more than the U.S. did. I'm really fascinated, like, who decides that they're going to take the front foot in this game. Argentina completely dominated possession against Australia. The Netherlands essentially just dominated the game against the U.S., but that's because the U.S. wanted the ball. I don't think either of these teams is going to want the ball necessarily in this one, so it could make for an awkward first 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, I could see this being a very low-scoring game, maybe, going to extra time. I don't think either of these teams wants to take the initiative like we talked about with Netherlands, when they're forced to kind of build out of the back and break teams down. It takes a while. A few moments of, Gakpo brilliance that we've seen in the group stage. And on the other hand, I think if Argentina is to concede that possession to the Netherlands, they've looked pretty sound defensively since that first game. I think it's 3 clean sheets, or no, my bad, because Australia just scored. But that was just a deflected goal. Aside from that, they've looked pretty sound, and It really could be just another one of those chess matches where one goal could make the difference, and Messi's individual brilliance could come into play against an opponent like that. They have the capabilities and the players to get past the Netherlands, but it looks tough.
Well, we'll see. You never know how things are going to go, but it is definitely some cause for concern. That said, there's really nowhere to go but up as far as Argentina is concerned. And this is a club that did, win Copa America last year. So it's not like they can't figure out how to put it together in a major tournament. Quickly, let's talk about the 2 games that we've got coming up on Monday. You've got probably the biggest mismatch of the entire knockout stage first round. You've got Brazil and South Korea going at it at 2:00 in the afternoon Eastern time. Korea did not play well in that group stage. They were very lucky to get through, and their reward is a Brazil squad that they look loaded for bear. I mean, they gave away that goal at the end. They ended up not winning all 3 games in the group stage, but the level of talent that they've displayed and the fact that they are getting Neymar back is going to be interesting. I will be curious to see if they play Neymar or start him against South Korea, because I just get the feeling they're not going to need it. And Korea, for as much as you like Heung-min Son, you like their spirit and their collective, it's hard to see them being able to match up against especially the wing play that Brazil's going to bring to the table here. I don't know what the route is here for South Korea other than just to completely bottle the game up, but they will get unlocked eventually if they do that.
Yeah, you would hope. I mean, without Neymar, you could say Brazil maybe hasn't looked as clinical, but they've still, dominated possession, had their chances. And I think, like you said, at some point, if South Korea approaches the game with that game plan, Brazil will just easily handle them. And I think on the other side for South Korea, it's just another one of those cases, I think, where getting out of the group stage was a win in itself. And you could see just that emotional toll it kind of took on, at the end of the game for Son. And just the rest of the group just to get out. And, maybe that could play a factor, but realistically, Son in particular, I don't think had the best first 2 games of the group stage. Obviously provided that assist, just an unreal play to take on like 5 players. at the end of that game to help them qualify. But realistically, yeah, Brazil should just be too much on the day. And yeah, I feel like Neymar might just be used in like a 20, 30-minute capacity, if anything, because of the opponent in front of them. He could probably afford to rest the match. But yeah, I don't see Brazil really struggling.
So in the other one, we get Japan, Croatia, which, this is a weird one to try to figure because Croatia ranked much higher than Japan in the FIFA rankings. Yet I didn't think they looked particularly great in the group stage. They take on a Japan squad that has been about as Jekyll and Hyde as you could possibly get. They've had terrible halves. They've had brilliant halves. And certainly, their ability to advance instead of Germany is probably one of the biggest upsets of this whole tournament. I don't really have a good read on this because, as we've talked about, like Croatia, older team, not a lot of there's very little point on the end of their attack. They do have Luka Modric. They do have some other really good players. It's hard to predict whether Japan's going to be able to come in at this level and do what they did in the group stage, because this is where, Croatia is the battle-tested team here.
Yeah.
They went to the final in 2018. They know how to win these types of games. I have no read on this whatsoever. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. These are probably two of the biggest wild cards, and they're matching up right away. I think it's perfect. This could be just one of those, one of the first, I guess, upsets you could call it, where Japan kind of sneaks by. I could see this going into extra time easily, or a penalty shootout, because all these games have been blowouts so far. So I think we're really in need of that. But yeah, Croatia, like you said, been battle tested. I think if Japan approaches them with like a disrespectful, approach like Canada did, and how Japan approached Costa Rica, kind of just shoving it in, then Croatia could just end up, being they're just so such a veteran core, and they're able to just pick you apart if you approach the match in that type of sense. But on the other hand, Japan's also just a wild card because you literally never know what to expect, and there's been such a controversy around the manager, his decisions, how he decides to use his players, and in the end it ended up working, but on each specific match it could go against you, and I could see this being a high scoring game. Japan definitely has the pace, definitely has the energy to kind of expose like that kind of the age of Croatia. But on the other hand, we saw how Croatia picked Canada apart for being naive. So
yeah,
it really just depends on how they approach the game, what their mindset is. And they have to respect Croatia's midfield, obviously.
Japan scored 4 goals so far in the World Cup, and 3 of them have come off the bench. Yes. That's wild. And 2 of them have been Ritsu Doan, who is right up there now. He's 1 goal behind the all-time record, or at least tying the all-time record for having at least 3 goals as a substitute. I'm sorry. Roger Milla had 4, but Andre Schürrle and Laszlo Kiss in 1982 both had 3. I guess you keep bringing them off the bench, whatever, that's fine, but that's pretty fascinating. Croatia is kind of tabbed as the likely winner in this one, but it's not overwhelming, and there's a better chance that Japan wins or this game goes to a draw than Croatia winning it outright. So we could see some extra time in this one. I wouldn't be shocked by it. Should be an interesting one to say the least. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for us. Any final thoughts, Camille, before we knock things off here?
Yeah, I think like you said in the beginning, most of these round of 16 draws, I guess, have been not on paper, at least have not been as, evenly matched. And we saw that in these first 2 days. But I think the second half really has that potential to bring us some of those upsets. I think Morocco, on Tuesday, has the potential to upset Spain, getting revenge from that group stage from the last World Cup.
Yep.
Portugal, definitely not an easy matchup against Switzerland, the way they're looking. I think out of these last 4, Brazil should really be the only shoe-in. And other than that, I think we'll get some more interesting games, some more early leads from teams that you may not expect to advance. And yeah, it's the beauty of the World Cup, and I think we'll see that in this later half of the round of 16.
At least according to the stats, this Japan-Croatia game is the closest matchup of the three. So we'll see what happens with all that. But Portugal, Switzerland also up there as well. Well, we'll see what happens. Should be a lot of fun next couple of days as we finish up the first stage of the knockouts and get ready for the quarterfinals, which will be coming up a couple of days after. We'll finally get a break on Wednesday. We can breathe a little bit before we start back up on Friday. But Camille, thank you as always for joining me on the show. And thanks to all you folks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to Pod of the Century as we continue to bring you through the rest of the World Cup here on the podcast. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. So long, everybody.